And as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, there is hundreds of electoral observers who are now in Mexico to watch and see what happens during this election tomorrow. So joining us is a group of these electoral observers. First, let's present Albert Zapanta. He's president of the United States Mexican Chamber of Commerce. Also joining us today is Beth Bowman. She's president of Irving-Las Colinas Chamber of Commerce. And Stuart Jones, who's president and CEO of American Brownfields Corporation. And they're all here as electoral observers. Al, welcome to the show. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
We have to tell our audience we know each other for the last 20 years. It's good to see you back in Mexico. First, let's talk about what the chamber is doing in Mexico. You've been observers for how many elections?
This is our fifth election.
Right.
We started with the Presidente Ernesto Zedillo's election, and then of course we made President Fox, President Calderon, and President Peña Nieto.
Really? So, okay, this is interesting. So what do electoral observers do? I mean, I think we all have this image of you all running around the country, Beth, and asking questions and going into, I mean, what do you actually do?
Running around the country asking questions?
I mean, you have these, this is kind of the perception we have, but in reality, what does an electoral observer do?
So we have the pleasure to come in and really watch history take place. Mm-hmm. I represent 1,900 member investors and their 220,000 employees in Irving, Texas. And obviously, Mexico is very important to our businesses that are involved in trade.
That's fantastic. Stuart, this is the most sophisticated electoral system in the world. It's something that I don't tire of saying because this is really amazing. You've got millions and millions of people involved, most of them volunteers, but already trained. What has been your impression so far of what's been going on?
It seems to be a very sophisticated process, and it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be invited to serve as an observer in these elections. These are historic elections, as always, and we certainly hope that the outcome will continue the favorable relations with the United States and with Texas. I'm a Texan.
You know, this is what's so fascinating about the Mexico Chamber, Al. Because in many ways you have been an observer not only of these elections but of the bilateral relationship for the last 25 years, and you have seen the changes. Right. And if of all groups you understand the importance of having a good bilateral relationship. Let's start talking about the future challenges that Mexico's new president is going to have in the Trump era. I mean, what do you think is going to happen?
Well, first of all, the history between the United States and Mexico is so intertwined, both economically, culturally, and territorially. We're neighbors, and so it's not going to be anything that's going to, because of the rhetoric that's been going on, that it's going to really rip apart a long-standing relationship. We work as a nonpartisan business association. We're the oldest and the only binational, bilateral U.S.-Mexican, to really try to make sure that strength of the economic underpinnings between our two countries is working and working well. So we think NAFTA will continue. When we were part of that, as you'll remember, Ana Maria, that energy was not part of it. The internet was not functioning as a business entity.
Didn't exist. The internet when NAFTA was first negotiated.
And so at the end of the day, it needs to be updated, and I think that's the appropriate way to go, and we're trying to help that along.
You know, we do have this nightmare, Al, Stuart, and Beth, that we're going to wake up one day and there's going to be a tweet from President Donald Trump saying, I'm out of here. And it is, you know, when we speak with the Mexican negotiators, I mean, that's a reality. I mean, there is that
That's a real possibility. Yeah.
What are you all thinking? I mean, what would happen?
And now maybe even WTO.
And now WTO. What would happen if we don't have if the United States doesn't belong to WTO, will not belong to TPP, and then decides to walk away from NAFTA? Beth, Stuart.
So I believe it's very important for our business industry to be communicating with our elected officials, our President of the United States, President of Mexico, to make sure they understand how their supply chain operates across borders. And we'll continue to encourage, as the voice of business in Irving, Texas, our business industry, our 10,000 businesses, Fortune 1,000 companies that have a presence in our community, to make sure their voice is heard amongst our elected officials.
Yeah. But is that happening, Stuart?
I think the relevance and importance of the bilateral relations, particularly trade relations, has never been higher. The prosperity of both nations depends on it. The alliances that we formed through NAFTA need to be strengthened. Some need to be tweaked. But I hope that all three nations will look forward to remaining close to our mutual prosperity.
We can have T-shirts made tweaked, not tweeted. Al, I
Yes.
want to take you up on that on the fact that you've been here for 4 different processes, and that puts
That's
you
very-
4 times 6. That's what 24 years. What have been the changes that
Yeah.
you've seen since
Well, that's
then?
Augustine, that's, first of all, it's good to see you, my friend.
Likewise, Al.
It's something that I feel very strong about, being a Mexican-American con raíces in Chihuahua y Sonora, but born and raised in California, Los Angeles, and now a Texan. The bottom line is we are going to go forward together. I've had an opportunity to tell then candidate Donald Trump that NAFTA is not only the strongest, most powerful trading bloc on the globe. We will continue because you can't extricate, no matter. President Trump can leave, but we're not leaving. Put it very simply put, because the ties are too strong. I mean, I was the senior advisor to Ronald Reagan when I was finishing my.
Who was the first to actually propose a NAFTA with
and,
Mexico?
and
Right,
my discussions with him was very straightforward. He believed that we have a North American free market, and he was correct. At that time, we discussed, and I had recommended to him that it be called a North American Accord. That way we could get there politically. Canada was in '86, and now Mexico in '93, '94. To me, those bonds are so strong, and it's getting stronger. Why? Irving, Texas, over 70% of the children that are in the K to 12 in all our 5 schools, major high schools, are of Mexican
Mexican or
and
Mexican
Hispanic.
descent, yeah.
So guess what? We're here.
Do you know what, Al? We're both Mexican American.
Yes.
And we've lived through different periods of the political process and the way Mexican Americans participate in U.S. politics. How do you deal with the rhetoric, Donald Trump's rhetoric against Mexico? Because it is having, I have to say, an enormous impact in the way Mexicans now view the United States. I think they've separated Donald Trump's rhetoric from the rest of the America in general. But it still has created a lot of tension in all parts of the bilateral relationship.
You're seeing a big rise in anti-American sentiment that wasn't there.
That wasn't there before.
Well, that's the sad part of it. And there are parts of our country in the United States that unfortunately are looking for, I guess,
Pound of flesh.
to really have.
It's very aggressive.
Whipping boys.
Right.
And guess what? But at the end of the day, I say it very pointedly, is that no matter what the president does, and why we feel very strong and why we operate with the U.S. Congress, who we bring down each time. And we're here because we want CEOs to understand the strength of the Mexican, not only people, but of the Mexican economic system and political system. And that's why we bring them here every 6 years. At the end of the day, I will tell you that it can only get stronger. It's not a blue or red wave, it's a brown wave.
Wow, that's pretty good.
That's a great
Stuart, Beth, I get the impression, and I may be wrong because we're watching the news from down here, that the American business community that has benefited from NAFTA hasn't spoken loud enough to be able to stop where we are right now. And I may be wrong, but there's just the sense that, NAFTA is not that popular in the United States, at least electoral, and those who have benefited, entire states.
The
that have
14 million jobs that depend on trade
we
with
don't
Canada
hear
and
your
Mexico.
voices loud. Am I wrong? Am I being unfair?
Well, maybe we just need to make our voices a little louder.
Maybe.
For my part, I'd like to bring our company down here and do projects. We recycle good locations. We seek out properties that are off the market for fear of contamination from a prior commercial or industrial use, and where we can vision what it should become. What is the exit strategy? We go in, acquire it, get it resolved, and bring it back into the market. We recycle good locations, and I'd like to be doing that in Mexico. We worked previously a bit in Guanajuato on a project, and I'm presently working on one in Mexico City in the Historic Center, but that there be a regime and laws of environmental regulation and that allow businesses to come in with certainty. There's a lot of sites that can be turned over and
Curiously enough, the new embassy for the United States is at the old Colgate Palmolive plant,
Right.
and it's $1 billion project, and that is a brownfield site. So as you say, these urban areas can certainly have a great opportunity.
One last question, because we're running out of time. Beth, do you have a sense that because of this rhetoric and concerns of the future of NAFTA, that U.S. companies are considering not investing in Mexico for a while, waiting to see what the results are of the elections?
I would compliment what General Zapanta and Stuart have shared. Our organizations, the Irving Chamber, the U.S.-Mexico Chamber of Commerce, our business industry needs to continue to have a conversation, as Stuart shared, maybe get a little louder.
Right.
Continue to be consistent. And I would share during this time, the companies that are based in Irving, Texas, where we're home to have a local address but global access, those companies are truly celebrating diversity, inclusion, and we're having those conversations consistently. I think amongst our elected officials, we need to encourage our business industry to continue to have consistent conversations, and as Stuart shared, maybe get a little bit louder.
Wow.
Al, Beth, Stuart, thank you very much for being here this morning. I'll remind you, we're not neighbors. We are roommates.
That's a really good
I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, voters might already know